Thursday, March 25th, Webster Town Board Workshop. Tonight we have two agenda items, so we'll start right out. We have two gentlemen here from Logier Consulting to discuss Phase 2 environmental assessment on 600 Ridge Road, which many people watching at home may know as the Webster Furniture Strippers previously. So Mike and Jim, right?
Yep. All right.
Shoot away.
Thanks, Tom. While we're here is I had a request to clear up a few of the environmental concerns that may have come out of this site. We know it's privately owned and also presents a few different environmental hazards for public safety with the deteriorating building and the proximity to the road. So I sent over some proposals, preliminary proposals, basically an asbestos screen to see if we can help get the building down. Basically to see what we have inside of it is really the point of the asbestos process. It's required by the state to have some type of asbestos survey prior to the demolition. And again, these were all basic proposals. So we wanted to have two different things. One was the basic screen, and then the other piece was maybe we do a whole environmental survey for everything that's inside, including the lead and potential PCBs in the ground, soil contaminations from the earlier. I think there was a phase 1 done at one point. So we saw there may be a need for a phase 2, and that's where we brought Jim in. So I can speak to the asbestos after a little bit of Jim's talk. Jim is really the majority of this will be driven by the environmental, the soil and potential below the soil, I guess we want to say. Subsurface.
Well, thanks. Thanks for the opportunity to come in. I'm Jim Moore. I'm the owner-operator of JM Environmental Consulting, LLC. I'm here to present you with just an overview of a Phase 2 environmental site assessment for the former Webster Furniture Stripper property at the 600 Ridge Road, Webster, New York location. If you all have your PowerPoint presentation on paper, there's like 6 slides. If we go to the second page, if you just look at a preliminary characterization, the goal is to determine the presence and the degree of the contamination on the property for the environment. And the components to that are planning the sampling program. You need to know what you're going to analyze for. Then you'd be going out and doing the field activities, field work. You would determine in the field based on PID readings, visual inspection, what samples you're going to analyze for, what depths, what area, based on the borings that we put in. Once they get submitted to a laboratory, there will be a return time, a 10-day return time, 10 business days for the lab to present that data to me. There's certain QA/QCs that you can do for the lab data, which depicts the percent recovery within the laboratory. Once we receive that data, I'll review it. I'll present it if it's a commercial property, or if you want to make it a residential property, or whatever it's going to be over there. There's different limits that we have to look at in comparison to what the detection of the results are, and that will go into the report. The third page, again, developing the sampling plan. You got to develop that sampling program, determine the parameters, to analyze, choose the sampling, and the quality assurance techniques. The fourth slide just presents the site location. I figured I'd put that in there just as a reference on how tight the property lines are. There's not much area there to be able to put borings in. But there are locations, I drove by there, so there are some locations we can put them in. The fifth slide, I put a proposed boring locations in to identify, and two of them are in the garage area. I had a discussion with the subcontractor for the geoprobe, and he does have a low profile geoprobe that we could core a sample, and then we can go down 8 to 12 feet below ground surface without taking the garage down at this point, to save a little bit of money, unless you feel that we should be taking the buildings down prior to the phase 2 investigation. So the last PowerPoint presentation, it really comes down to is the field work. I kind of described it. We, of course, do UFPO doing the underground utility clearance, sampling methodology, making sure the instruments are clean between borings, record any notes or photos as we go along. I'd be geologically logging the samples, and reviewing the presence of each core as we go vertically. And then I would
what legality is there that gives us the right to go into on that property and test? Why is it, when does it become our responsibility to do so? If we're liable, I mean, the parts of the front of the building have already fallen off. And people that walk that neighborhood all the time have called me personally to tell me that things are falling off over the years. Things are falling off and they're worried about somebody getting hit by a brick or whatever. What makes us responsible for that building if we don't own it? And are we not trespassing if we enter that property? Unless we condemn it.
Well, Charlie, we talked about that with the gentleman from the county. There are a couple of ways, and you might have remembered them, I had it in my notes, of how you get access to, well, first of all, the current owners handed the keys to Rod Potter.
Okay.
That's how we had, right, and that's how we had access to this point.
So that's an answer to the one.
And also, to anticipate a question, because this is where you're going, in terms of liability, of course, the current owner or owners would be primarily liable. I have no idea what their insurance situation is or what their financial situation is, but if anybody was harmed, I would think they would be primarily liable. Again, like you all, I'm not sure how the town would be. And legally, what right do we have to go in and condemn? That's pretty vague. This is not a situation where, as we have in the past, gone in and condemned a few buildings around town and then had them torn down, etc. Those were all residential properties and were dangerous to people either who were living in them or wanted to move back into them. There was different reasons. That's pretty much the standard. Here, as far as I know, it's not a residential property, nobody is living in the property, it's commercial. And again, you have a situation where the county has pretty much washed their hands of it. And the supervisor and I, having met with the gentleman from the county, I think we were surprised at the, I don't want to say cavalier attitude, but the county has changed. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you, Karen. I'll move it over here. The county has changed over the years in the sense that the county no longer actually takes ownership of these properties. What they do is they sell the tax liens. And in this case, they have sold tax liens, and so the primary lien holder is an out-of-town company, but they are having trouble unloading it. So there's not a lot of value to this property right now to anybody. And legally, I don't know what right we would have to go in and quote-unquote condemn it, okay? I mean, by we meaning the town.
Yeah.
Charlie, I'm sorry. If we went with the preliminary testing and there was found to be issues with the property, would then we have a legal right to condemn it?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's one of those things where, I've been doing this a long time, it's one of those things I'd have to really do research on to find a basis or a means to possibly do that.
Charlie, under my understanding is that the legal owner of the property would have to do any remediation of that property before it could even be sold.
I'll tell you something, since we're talking, and I'll speak frankly. I have a little bit of concern about how far we go with this in terms of expending town money, because we don't own the property, we don't have a legal interest in it, and even though we may have I'll say small p political interest in it, because the community would like to see the property rehabilitated, and I think it would be a good thing to happen. I think it is potentially a great corner for development. However, the fact is that by law, we're limited in what we can spend our money on. And if we put money into a property that we don't own and have no legal interest, either currently or even potentially, I don't know how we can justify that. It may not be a permitted expenditure.
John, can I ask it?
Sure.
I know that, I mean, I don't like spending money. There you have it. We've in the past as a town cost somewhere between $30,000 and $50,000 of taxpayer money to demolish the building.
Correct.
What was the premise? What was the legal by
We
law?
have a,
How did we expend $50,000 to
Okay, we
destroy
have
a building?
in our town code, in chapter 86, we have a procedure whereby the town, usually in conjunction with the county health department, but the town generally can determine whether or not a particular property is a danger to the owners and/or the immediate neighborhood, in terms of health and safety of the people who are living in the house. These are residential properties. They will be charged to the owner of the property in terms of any expenses. But all we have done in those particular cases is condemn them, had the offending structure demolished and then carted away. We paid for that, put that on the taxes owed, but we have not taken ownership, nor have we.
Do you think in a situation like that, you put another lien on the property for the
Yeah,
cost,
basically.
right? Do you
That's
think we
what
ever
we
got
got,
any
yeah.
of that $50,000 back?
I'm sorry, have we ever gotten the money back?
I mean,
I don't know the answer.
usually a property in that condition
Yeah,
has got.
I don't know the
issues.
answer. I don't know if any, there haven't been a lot of them, but I don't know if what the answer is in terms of if any of them have been purchased, for example, if the property's been purchased, or if the owners or the owners' families have come back and rebuilt.
Yeah.
But Charlie, when we talk about whether it's a hazard to the neighborhood, it's a hazard to the people who are living near it, this is certainly not a residential piece of property, but there are people living next door. There are people in the neighborhood who walk by it every day.
Yeah,
If
but
bricks
this-
are falling
these
off of
don't-
it.
Okay, yes, that may be the case, but again, the other properties, and I don't have that code in front of me, so I can't tell you we have some very specific criteria listed. But the other properties that we demolished or had demolished were properties that were literally falling down. They weren't. This is a structure that's still in good shape. It's still there. The other ones were falling down. They were vermin infested. They were very unhealthy. They were really not fit for the purpose for which they were to be used, which was residential property. So this is a commercial, and I think there's definitely a difference. We've never done anything with a commercial property.
I'm curious as to why the county hasn't ever done the testing. Because if they did do the testing and found it to be clean, then they could take care of it and sell it, right?
They did the testing and was able to define what the phase 3 remediation would cost. They still could at least take title and sell it, because they'd be able to tell a prospective buyer, there isn't an unknown anymore.
Yeah.
And the county, look, hindsight's 20/20. County's dished out over $60,000 in the last several years. I mean, if they would have had the foresight, maybe they should have spent $8,000 back, but that's not how. It's not how a business would handle the situation. But a county government that has $1 billion budget, that's a conscious decision, Barry, that they are going to pay these 30 properties purgatory into perpetuity. I think it's the worst waste of tax money. I was shocked when I heard the story, but it is what it is. And, it's funny because I had told Mike and Jim, this is the first time I met you, we tentatively scheduled you guys to come in and present today. And I said, tentatively, because Charlie and I need to meet with the county. Depending upon how that meeting goes, we might cancel this. Well, the way that meeting went is that what we found out from that meeting, Charlie, to me, was the next time that it would be up for them being able to perfect their foreclosure would be 18 months from now. And I even said at that meeting, I said, I think that's a blessing, because we might need that time to really figure out what to do. We don't have to go and spend $10,000 today. Nobody wants to spend the $10,000. But everybody wants the end goal, I think, I don't wanna
Yeah.
speak, of that place being resolved. And, I mean, look, if we want, on laws and all that we know of, hey, it's not our problem. But I think it is our problem. It's our town.
It is our problem, because it's our town, and our residents want something to do with it, but how do we do something, how do we do this?
I don't know.
And, I mean, if we were to do this and accomplish what we would like to accomplish, it would be find out that there is no contamination in the ground. And if somehow we could work through this and recoup some of the monies we expended to discover that, I would think that's really a good idea. But what we're looking at right now is going in to find out, one, it's either contaminated and the county will take it and deal with it, or two, it is contaminated, the county isn't gonna do anything with it, and there it is, and we can't do anything either, so it's not ours to clean up, and if it is contaminated and we did take ownership of it, then it would be up for us to clean it up, because it would become ours.
I don't even know how, I mean, I don't wanna pay for cleaning up, I don't wanna take ownership of it.
No,
And Charlie, I don't even know if there's a legal way, a path to take ownership of it.
We did
Is it
discuss that
condemnation?
briefly, and I actually did some research on that, because there was a mention of quote-unquote temporary ownership for the purpose of a phase two. Have you heard of that? Have you gentlemen heard of that? Matt, have you ever heard of that, phase of temporary ownership? I looked it up, it was referred to us in the particular law, and I could not find it in that law, and I went to which I have copies of sections of the public health law of New York State to see if I could find something in there. I really couldn't find anything specifically looking. In other words, temporary ownership would then give us the possible right to hire somebody to go into a phase two. The phase two would then become an easement for access.
He has the ability
So,
to.
yeah, the term that I was given was temporary possession, which didn't sound. Well, it's a little more, you're right, but it's a little more than an easement, because you're actually going in and doing something, you're not just, yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny, Charlie, because when I said that Rod Powder was able to just get the keys from the current title holder, who really doesn't feel like they own the property anymore, I don't think that they would just hand over the keys again for us to do an environmental. Because if you were their attorney, would you?
No.
Right.
That's easy, that's an easy
So,
one,
I mean,
no.
there's a technical problems here, you know, it boggles the mind, but I don't know. The current, well, you gotta love this. When we were talking to the county said, you know, you could really do us a favor by bringing the assessment down by half, because then we'd have to reimburse less. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not gonna put any time and energy in deployment of resources.
Can we raise it?
Yeah, I said, to tell you the truth, why would I wanna, I mean, look, I don't wanna get, and we've gone past half an hour. The county said the minimum bid on that property at the foreclosure next year, if nobody bids on it, which nobody will, then they would sell it for $87,000, and that number will go up by the, you know, and, well, who's gonna come in and buy it for $87,000?
Yeah.
So, you know, we already, they know that, but he wasn't gonna come out and say, you know, he did say, well, in the past, there's some precedents where we took a discount on it, but by law, we have to sell it by that referee deed or whatever the heck it is. You know, we've got to sell it by law by that referee deed until nobody will buy it for that, and then we'll negotiate down. So,
It's really in the control of the county.
Yeah.
To a very large extent, as to how they want to handle it. And again, they've changed because, as they explained to the supervisor and myself, they don't take ownership anymore, or they rarely take ownership, or they used to do it pretty regularly, and they stopped. I don't know what you say.
no, they take ownership. I mean, look, the 9 acres were, you know, across from that. They took ownership through a tax foreclosure because they didn't, in their preferred.
No, they sold it. No, they sold the tax lien on that.
Right, when you say take, right, yeah. I'm sorry.
We
I thought you meant the-
renegotiated the taxes, yeah. I mean, they, instead of, in lieu of foreclosing on taxes, they're selling, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
But they're not actually taking title to where they become the owners, and then they would be the ones who would. I guess the way I'm looking at it, and I stand corrected, if you want to correct me, obviously, but it seems to me, this is a gamble. We're hoping that the phase two is somewhat positive, or not negative anyway, that therefore that would then be a selling point for somebody that wants to come in and.
But did I understand you to say that the county had already done some very preliminary walk-in, look at it, and say, yeah, it's okay?
No, they don't go in it. What they've done,
They looked at it.
they didn't even look at it. They look at like a title report and
Okay.
a usage, and that's what, that's their perfunctory environmental
Right.
assessment.
Okay.
What they have done, Patty, since 2008, well, actually, they sold the tax liens from 08 to 13. From 2014, I'm trying to think how this, they have gone and put this property into the tax foreclosure process every single year. And every single year, they got to do all the proper notifications to all the lien holders, right? And then it ends up in September at the foreclosure auction. And if nobody buys it, then the county makes a decision. Do we take title, or do we say we don't want it? And essentially, for 15 years in a row, they have said,
They don't want it.
we don't want it. And that is purgatory into perpetuity.
The 87,000 comes about from the taxes from the time, from 2013 when they sold it, okay. You understand?
Yes. Yep.
Well,
So, like I said, I was kind of glad, in a way, that the gentleman said that because of COVID and the way the tax foreclosures are working, there's not going to be a September 21, or it's too late, I don't know. So it would be September 22, and I said, that's not altogether a terrible thing, because we might need time to have people think, okay, everybody wants the same end goal, the thing resolved, and owned by some private developer, and they either revitalize that building or they knock it down and they build something else, which we've said, because of the size of the lot, probably would entail some adjacent properties on Ridge and going north on Gravel. How to get to that end goal?
Can I ask the gentleman a couple questions?
Sure.
In terms of the phase two, it's required, once you do a phase two and you declare it a phase two, you are required to report it to the DEC?
Correct.
Okay.
Unless it's under legal, direct
Unless
to legal.
there's a court order or something prohibiting
Right.
that, you are by law required, or by regulation required to report. And then it becomes public, or it becomes foilable?
Foilable, yes.
Okay, so it wouldn't become public per se, but it is foilable.
Correct.
Okay. Is there a different standard for and this is a sort of a general question, but maybe you can answer. Is there a different standard for remediation if the property is owned by a private individual as opposed to a government?
I do not believe so. I think it's the same.
So if there were findings on a phase two, well, it could lead to a phase three, right? If there,
Well, there could be more delineation, horizontal and vertical extent.
okay. So a private, it wouldn't make any difference then, you're saying, between a private at this point? and-
Correct, as far as I'm aware.
Okay. What about if it goes to phase three and there's more contamination found? Do you know if that's the case?
It just gets tougher because it's, this type of property, it's so tight, with the property lines. If it extends out, into other, properties, it gets harder because
Like if
then you
it
get.
reached out into the ground because of
Right.
where it is, it's raised and it's on a hill.
Right, if it's spread,
Right.
Gets in the ground, water's traveling, there's ramifications to distance with that. So then you have a harder time getting into residential neighboring properties, try to stay in right-of-ways, put some wells in if you needed to do such. That's worst case scenario. If it's all just shallow, if it's on the surface, it hasn't leached down through, most of the soils out this way are, well, some of the areas is sandy over in that area. I'm not real familiar with that little stretch of area, but, it may not have leached through.
What kind of chemicals would normally be used in a furniture stripping store?
Well, you got your lacquers, your thinners,
Would those be held in the soil, or would they dissipate in time?
they could go vertical, yeah, they could travel, yeah.
And I said that the phase two in aggregate was around 10,000. It really is around 8,000 on the outside boring holes to see if there's ground contamination that could have gone to other properties.
Yeah, the initial
In and
borings, soils was about $7,000, I think it was.
The
67.
inside test, I think, for just asbestos was like 1,000. And that is because if it was gonna be demolished, from what I think you said, it's $50 a ton to take a top property down without asbestos, it's $100 a ton with asbestos. That's what we're, for whoever would be demolishing that. I don't want it to be us.
I don't see how it can be us. I'm not, that's not an opinion. That's I don't see how we are legally able to go and do that.
I don't want to knock down a building. And the thought of spending that kind of money to knock down a building, to me, is a waste of whatever. That's why I thought, and I get it, there's legality problems, there's whatever. It's a risk. Sitting around and just people talking over coffee and speculating for 15 more years about, I wonder what's over at that property. That can be done. Going in there and doing a phase two
From
is...
what Rod said, part of the roof is already caving in. Part of Rod's report said a portion of,
He did.
either the garage or the building, I forget.
It's not livable,
No,
but it's not, it's in better, it's solid.
it's brick.
It's brick, exactly. So, like I said, you know what? Guys, it's 6:14. It is an interesting conversation, and I gotta say this. I mean, it's March of 2021. It'll be at the tax foreclosure auction in September of 22. And if we don't do anything in the next 18 months, I can tell you what's gonna happen. No one's gonna bid, and then they're gonna let the current owner keep it. And that's what's gonna happen in September 23.
Because that's what's happened all the time.
24, and on and on and on and on and on. And I'm just saying that I'd like to think, because there's some bright people around here, there's gotta be a way to come up with a strategy to get to the end game. And there's no other way to get to the end game except for taking the risk of doing a phase two, whether it's donated by somebody, whether it's allowed by the, whether we pay for it or somebody pays for it or whatever, because that phase two could come out that there's nothing wrong with the property, or it's very minimal. It also could come out that there's uranium there, and it goes 10 feet down, and it's going to cost $1 billion. It's an exaggeration to make a point. But, I mean,
Well, it'd be worth a lot of
you know,
uranium.
well, I was going to say, maybe we could, get some energy.
He'd want to keep his samples.
I just,
I think you're right. The fact that we have extra time on this, September of 2022, can work in our favor. It's certainly not what any of the residents want to hear because they want this done yesterday. And to think of waiting another 18 months is not going to be real palatable to them. On the other hand, right now I'm not willing to believe that there's nothing that can be done. I think that we continue to explore this, we continue to look from all angles at it, and I really think that certainly the residents will appreciate that we're doing that and not just throwing up our hands. I just believe that there's got to be a way we can do something.
Well, and Danny, I want to make sure, regardless of what we do or don't do, we can't move up that September of 22
No,
timeframe.
no, but-
That is, if residents are upset that nothing can be done until September 22. No, things can be done in the 18 months leading
Exactly.
up, but there will be no somebody buying it, somebody developing, or whatever, because it's got to go through the next tax foreclosure auction at the county, and that's September 22.
But I think that time will allow us to perhaps to stage something where the
Yes.
results may be different in that September auction than they have for the past 14, 15 years, whatever it's been.
Or maybe there'll be a resident out there that's passionate enough, they're willing to come forward and pay for it.
Well, even then, Charlie would have to say, okay, great, we got the money, it's not, it's a donated, but what's the risk? It's,
Yeah.
once again, the question of, okay, so now we go and get it done, and now...
Yeah, I'm not gonna get into it right now, but I definitely have opinions on how far we should go, even
Yeah.
under those
I'm
circumstances.
wondering if we can go at all.
Well, and we're not going to figure that out tonight.
Okay. Next.
Mike and Jim, I hope to... Thank you for coming in,
Thanks for your report.
and,
Yes.
No problem.
I hope you understand our conundrum here.
I understand completely the situation, the
Okay.
only way you might be able to get on the property is through the DEC. It'll limit it, excess, to make sure that there isn't any problems, but again, you're still spending the money, so, but then you would know where you stood, with the with the subsurface, which is probably the most critical, and then the county, like you said, might pick up the property, if there wasn't an issue. But again, why aren't they doing it, I guess, is the key.
And here's the thing, I mean, realistically, if it gets paid for, and there's no liability tail, I'll say TAIL, to the town, we might be onto something here. Once the results are known, the community, especially developers and whatever, would know that, hey, in September 2022, that property's coming up. And now I know what environmental issues it has.
Exactly.
So, the county probably won't get their minimum bid because, whatever, but then they probably would take title to it because some developer's been talking to them about, I'd buy that. That's not gonna happen unless it's defined what is the problem. And as long as the town, I look at it, who said that, maybe a citizen comes up and says, I'll do the money. Well, as long as you, Charlie, figure out how we don't have any liability to remediation or any of that stuff,
I don't believe we do.
to me, I can't, having something where we're like, well, we think it might have this, we don't know if it has this, that's untenable to me, especially when it's going to go on forever and a day. But those are the two big things, the cost and whether we legally, and I see that as a town could pay for it, and two, even if it was paid for by somebody else, Charlie, how do you tell us unequivocally, irrefutably, whatever they find on that thing, it's not our problem. But at least it's defined now, the DEC knows what it is, the county knows,
Well, I didn't want to get into this, but the fact of us going onto the property may create a problem in and of itself legally and make us incur a possible liability, which we don't really have right now.
Yeah.
Will the DEC have any jurisdiction over this?
They, like
I've asked them to help. They said, well, nothing we see in our files that indicates there's anything significant enough, so phase 2 needs to be done.
Yeah, so they won't do the phase two. So nobody's gonna do the phase two because we're stopped legally or financially or for whatever reason, and the DEC won't do anything until they have the phase two. So we're in like the catch-22 situation, really.
Right.
Bureaucracy at work.
It's amazing. Hey,
Thanks, guys.
thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.
No problem. We understand it. Thank you.
We will be in touch, all right?
Thank you for your time.
Yep.
Well, the second topic tonight, second and last topic, is just a kind of a presentation discussion on the town of Webster's GIS system and the proposed summer internship program for 2021. And I would say that this is the Honorable Josh Artuso up to explain a little bit about this.
Well, for those of you that don't know, GIS, it stands for Geographic Information Systems, and it has a lot of really good uses. The way that the town of Webster currently utilizes GIS is to maintain our infrastructure, both stormwater and sanitary sewer system. So it's a computerized program where we can bring up on a map the approximate locations of, like I said, anything from sewer laterals to sewer mains, stormwater, outfalls, ponds, manholes, things of that nature. And what we've discovered over the past year or so is that certain areas of town are missing from that system. We simply don't have any data, location data, elevation data, diameter of pipe data, so that when there is an emergency event or failure of part of our infrastructure, our workers are going out in the field and they're looking at our system and things aren't always showing up accurately, or they're not showing up at all, which obviously is not very efficient. So what, as a part of our discussions between highway, sewer, and community development, we have had many discussions about how to potentially fill in the voids and verify what the data that we do have, so that we can better plan for routine maintenance and upgrades to the infrastructure, as well as when there's an emergency repair needed, our employees have access to the data that they need to respond in a quick and efficient manner. So what we've done is we've identified, and I believe you have a couple of spreadsheets in your packet, we've identified several areas of town, neighborhoods, subdivisions, both old and relatively new, that we have missing information. So we've begun reaching out to the engineers that prepared all of the drawings for when these developments were built, to see if they could provide us with the as-built maps, which they're supposed to do upon completion of the project. A lot of the mapping, the as-builts, for whatever reason, were never presented to the town. So there's significant gaps in our system. Some are really old subdivisions that were built in the 40s and 50s, and we simply didn't have the technology that we do now. And others are, like I said, within the past several years, newer subdivisions that we simply don't know the exact location of the pipes, or manholes and all the other associated infrastructure. So we've actually had some success in collecting quite a few of the as-built maps that can then be digitized and input into the GIS system. Right now, we're kind of using it primarily as a location tool, but there's the ability to really put in a lot of data behind, in the attribute table behind the mapping. So we can indicate when the pipes were installed, what the diameter, the material type, So, again, in an emergency, I'll use an example. There was a failure in the sanitary sewer system in the Royal Sunset Drive community. I believe it was over the summer. And we actually did have information in our GIS system. However, the location was incorrect. And our workers spent well over 4 hours just trying to locate where the infrastructure that needed attention was. So that's an example that if our system was up to date and fully complete, they would have been able to pull it up on their mobile phone, their tablet, whatever device, and know exactly within a matter of inches where they needed to go. You can also indicate the pitch, so when new developments are coming online, the sewer department can more quickly analyze whether or not this area could handle additional flow. So all in all, GIS is obviously a very powerful tool, and I think that we have some room for improvement in our system. So what we've done, we do have a GIS consultant that did participate in some of these interdepartmental discussions, and this effort that Webster hopes to do, he's seen done many times before, and we were originally looking to the county to utilize some of their existing equipment that we would be able to borrow from them. We currently don't have staffing capability at this current time to use existing employees to deploy out in the field to locate missing infrastructure and input it into the system. So what we're proposing to do, and what we've essentially put some feelers out at this point, is to tap into some of the local college and university students. This would be a really good opportunity for them, internship-wise, to gain some practical experience. And then the data that they would be out in the field collecting, they would then bring it back to the town and work with appropriate staff that would then do the quality control and make sure that the data that we've collected is true and accurate, and then it would be integrated into our existing system. So what we're proposing is essentially, depending on the response, to assemble teams of 2 for a variety of reasons, safety being first and foremost, that would go out in this late spring, early summer time period, utilizing GPS technology, and they would locate all of the items that I just mentioned in the areas that we have the most concern and the most missing gaps of data. And that would be the gist of the summer internship program relating to GIS. We're targeting engineering students, surveying students, GIS, environmental management students, and to date we've had several people reach out to me and indicate that they're very interested in the opportunity. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Is this going to be paid or unpaid?
This would be a paid internship opportunity. We would look to create, there already is a civil service title for summer interns. It would be a seasonal temporary position or positions. We've reached out to other municipalities to see what their experience has been in the past in terms of interns and their utilization of them for something similar. There were a couple that have pursued this sort of thing. We got to feel, what the pay rate for something like that would be, and we incorporated that information into our proposed description of the opportunity.
And I gotta just say that, I think you guys have all heard me say, you know, the two things I'd like the organization, the town government to focus on is organizational structure and customer service. Well, unintended consequences of organizational structure. The way I understand it, our building department head retired in 2008, and our assistant building department, Rod Potter, rose to being the building department.
The main building inspector.
Main building. And that paralleled the fact that the housing market and everything crashed in 2008. So there was no backfilling of a position for assistant building inspector. And that kind of made sense in 2008, all right? Well, now we fast forward to 2021. Somewhere along the lines, building and stuff returned to pre-2008 levels, but we never got an assistant building inspector. So as I like to say, water seeks its level. Rob Potter, and I don't know who was involved in this decision and how it went, but the person in DPW whose main job is GIS came over and helped Rod in the building department, a pseudo assistant building department inspector. Problem is, the person's pay as a GIS engineering person is significantly higher than an assistant building inspector, and we surmise from what we've seen about 70 to 80% of this person's time over the last few years has been doing building inspections. So let me ask you this. If your job is to do GIS and you're spending 70 to 80% of it doing building inspections, the handout that Josh gave you, do you know why we have as-built that we haven't got and we haven't uploaded to our GIS system?
Didn't have the time.
Something had to give.
So we have as-built in hand that just haven't been uploaded?
We didn't say that.
Oh, I thought that's what you just said.
No. I don't want to, look, I guess the best way to say it is, there wasn't much work done on GS in the last 5+ years. Okay? Because the person was doing building inspection. But we didn't have a budgetary position for assistant building inspector, so we saved money on that. But we had a GIS person who really wasn't doing GIS. And so now we have to figure out how to get our GIS grid of all these subdivisions or whatever up to snuff. Now, some of it is chasing around as-builts that are new developments, and they should have been within the normal course of a development as it reached its finality. The DPW department would have had on their checklist, get the as-builts, and then get them across to the GIS person who would upload them, right? But that wasn't managed that way, and I'm not here, it just wasn't, so we now, and Josh, I think you're spearheading it, are going out, and the engineering firms are starting to furnish them to us. And that's good. But some of these, as he showed you, they're just old subdivisions and whatever, and so we just don't have any information on them. So we have to go out and manually get them in there. Yes, Pat?
So if we get 2 to 4 interns, and they're going to gather the information and bring it back, and they're going to work with the people in-house to make sure this information is accurate and get it in there appropriately, is the person that they're going to be working with the one who's spending a lot of his time doing inspections?
Well, it's funny you should ask that,
Because
Patty.
we're going to have him
All right.
be able to dedicate more of his time to this.
Patty?
Did I ask a bad question?
No, you actually asked the perfect question, is that the organizational structure, and you know I've said that since Josh has really taken over the DPW department in July of last year. He's done yeoman work.
By default, of course.
Yes, I mean, you know, and
Thank you,
I
Josh.
can't tell you how excited I think we all are for Mary Harrington to start. So Mary Harrington, she has GIS and engineering under her. So I don't want to speak for her, but I know this, and Josh and I have talked a lot about it. I'd like to see if the structure of DPW, how do we structure it organizationally to get the work done and try to have it be budget neutral? It's quite a challenge.
Can we hire 2 to 4 interns and make this be budget neutral?
Paul, we've already talked to about this, and he's got it. I mean, he's shown us how. I'm talking about the fact that at some point, we need to get an assistant building inspector, I think. And how you do that when we don't have one right now, well, that's going to add money to the budget. So there's just some chess moves that will go into play that by the time, I mean, these interns will be hopefully working between May 15th and August 15th, that there may be some other, we have
I
more work to do
understand.
in making sure that we're getting the bang for the buck
Yeah, I know
with
that
our DPW department.
we have discussed the GIS system no less than 3 times since I've been on the board. And I know that the first discussion, I think, was that software no longer supported the first system that we had. So then we had to go for a whole different system. And I remember the presentations, they were flashy and they were colorful, and manholes were over here and sewer lines were over, it was amazing what this software could do. But if we don't have anybody dedicated to doing it, what difference does it make what its capabilities are?
Well, I think the good news, and correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, there's no software involved. There's some universal
Whatever the
program.
cloud or whatever it is.
Yeah,
Yes.
and it was great. I got to tell you something. Penfield, they had us over a couple weeks ago, Josh. Our patron, the 3 foremen from the highway department, Josh, myself, and they hosted us to kind of show what they do on GIS. It was pretty cool. But what they use, whatever, it's the same thing we use, right? The software application, whatever. It's
Yes.
No, I'm not an IT guy,
No,
but it's,
no,
it's
I'm laughing because they use it.
they do. Yes, they do.
I have a question, just
Yeah, but that's
Just want to interrupt
We'll
for
get
just a second. On this printout, we have a section of roads that say, will never be able to get as-built, need to do GPS. I can see where a lot of these, they're really old.
right.
But then I look at Heathland Circle and Area Lane. Those are new roads. Why can't we ever get a as-built to those?
That's a good question. I was not the one that categorized this list,
Okay.
so I can't speak to what the rationale behind it was. That's a good-
Unless the company that did the as-bills for those no longer exists and has left the world.
That's potentially a possibility.
Okay, just curious. Because I recognize all the other ones as being fairly old,
Right.
but there's a few on here that are not. So, anyway, okay, never mind.
And I wouldn't put my hand on a stack of Bibles and say that that is 100% accurate.
Okay,
All right, because that,
all right.
It's probably just a first blush inventory
pretty much, yeah.
of what's missing.
I didn't put together the list. I know
Yeah.
that. I wouldn't know what the, but it is interesting, and I think when Josh said about, what you call it, the attributes that you can get robust on pipe size, type of pipe, PVC or whatever.
Materials.
I mean,
Pitch.
pretty pitch. I mean, here we are, we've been stuck for a couple months on that state road sewer bypass because we don't know if the pitch is right to take all the EDUs for the IMA we're doing with Penfield. That's just inefficient, waste of time. Now we gotta get, I guess, somebody out there to check it out. that wouldn't be the case if we had the, GPS, or I'm sorry, the GIS accurate on these things. So,
That isn't that old either.
no, it's not.
And Crossbridge, is it Crossbridge?
Crossbridge.
But-
Cross Point.
But Betty, you,
What's the name of the developer?
Crosstown.
Crosstown? They should have all that.
well, it was Visca.
Oh, you're for the Penfield.
For the,
Yeah. Well, I shouldn't have taken it. There was
More
as-built,
convoluted.
and it said it was pitched, but then there was somebody scratched off and
Oh,
said,
okay.
no, the pitch, and we're like, well, who did that? And so now we're not sure if it is pitched right, and, did they build it differently to what the planning board had approved, blah, blah, blah. But Betty, your question is an excellent one of, well, who would these interns then be bringing this data back to? Would it be the person in charge of GIS, who is now currently not spending time on GIS?
Are we prepared to have that person
It's a
taken
great
out of what they're doing right now?
Well, every reaction has a reaction. That's why, the building department has to be looked at. It's funny, Josh, what were the building permits January through this time in March last year versus January through this time in March this year?
Last year, January to March, right before COVID hit, we had about 115 building permits issued during that time. And for the same time period this year, we're at 145.
And to give you some perspective, last year when COVID did hit, April and May were 300 building permits in those 2 months, 150 a month. I don't know what kind of volume we're going to get in April and May. We're already ahead of last year at this time. And I'm just saying that this volume of building permits and the inspections needed has manifested that our GIS person is putting 70 to 80% of their time in. And it might be worse because I don't know how they used Will Barham. He was the village building inspector, and they had him over here. Something.
he was a backup, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, he's retired now.
Right,
Well, he was over here a lot last year because we were swamped.
okay.
And so if we have that type of thing, he's not available to be a backup now because he's retired. Does that mean our GIS person, if we don't change the organizational structure and workflow, might be putting 90% of his time? So it's, it was a great question, Patty. I do feel good, like MRB has consulted with us on this. The good news is that over the last 5 years, we've paid very little money to MRB on this consulting and of GIS. The bad news is we've paid very little money to MRB the last 5 years because we haven't been doing it. But we save money. So, anyway, and like I said, I want to, because the GIS falls under the org chart under Mary as the town engineer, I really think we need to give her 3 months of discovery to, before, what do you think, Mary? I mean, with Josh, I think we've gotten a good first 9 months on this Josh has done an amazing job of documenting what they do and also working on policies, procedures, and things, ticking and tying, so that some of the stuff that we've, as you guys know, have found from the last 5+ years.
So do we just give Josh the permission to go ahead and hire the guy?
I'm sorry, I'm taking executive privilege.
He already did it?
Yeah, because
Oh, okay.
we met with Paul, and that's why it was written wrong, proposed, or whatever. It was more to discuss and describe to you what we're doing.
Okay.
Because Paul, because of the way that, well, heck, by the time Mary starts, we've already had a budget for that position that we had 3 or 4 months of nobody in that position. So when you take basically a minimum wage to some college kids, you know what I mean? It makes it budget neutral, per se.
Okay.
And actually, I thought it was pretty cool. I asked you this question last week, I think, Bill, when you were in engineering school, how many women were in your classes? You said very few. Didn't you say the first 3 applicants we got were for the internships?
All three have been females, yes.
Engineering is becoming women-dominated, at least from our applicants, town engineer in this internship. We'll see. Have we gotten any more?
Oh, that's it.
No, not in this. Have we gotten any more applicants?
No,
Yeah.
the posting ends at the end of March, so
Okay,
still a few
right.
more days, but.
Because we figured there'll be like, what are colleges, like May 15th to August 15th? Is that about when they're out?
Yeah,
I mean, in a normal,
Approximately.
Whatever. So, anyway, hey, do you have any more comments, questions on this?
no.
It was a good question, Barry. Well, guess what? I think our workshop for the evening has ended, and guess what? This is our last non-open to the public under COVID restrictions. You gotta sign up. But next Thursday night, April 1st, this is not an April Fool's Day joke, our regular board meeting, the public can come into the boardroom, but I would suggest they follow online to sign up, and there will be COVID,
Right, I mean, we're not gonna be letting 50 people in the room.
we will not be letting 50 people in the room, Patty, that is a fact. Yeah, so, have a good night, everybody.
Thank you.